in a quiet suburban corner of Massachusetts, where the lawns were trimmed into near perfection and the mailboxes seemed to stand at attention, lived a couple whose love story once held the softness of a summer novel. Their home, a charcoal gray two-story colonial, sat near a row of maple trees that blazed red in October and glistened silver in the snowfall of February. Inside that house lived a man who once swore he would never break the heart of the woman he loved, and yet had done exactly that. His name was Ethan Caldwell, a man who had built himself from the ground up, with a mortgage that was finally manageable, a job that allowed him some weekends off, and a sense of comfort he once thought was unreachable. And then there was Marissa Caldwell, a woman who had built her life around the promises he made under fairy lights on a July evening 10 years earlier. Together, they had created a life that looked perfect from the outside. But perfection, their kind of perfection, was thin enough for guilt to punch through it. Ethan had never planned to cheat. That was the part that echoed in his chest late at night when he could feel his heartbeat through his shirt. It wasn't something he woke up intending to do. It unfolded the way a storm does on an otherwise calm day, clouds rolling in quietly, little signs ignored until lightning finally struck. It began at work. It always seems to begin somewhere ordinary. There was a new project manager on contract, someone whose praise came easily and whose laughter filled the conference room like warm light. Ethan wasn't starved for affection, but when someone fed you attention at the exact moment you doubted your own worth, it was easy to mistake validation for connection. Conversations turned into shared coffees. Shared coffees turned into long drives after work, and long drives eventually turned into a mistake. A mistake that became a secret that became a wall. He told himself it wasn't emotional. He told himself it didn't mean anything. He told himself he loved Marissa because he did. He still did. But love wasn't always protection against temptation. And temptation wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, patient waiting. Marissa sensed the shift before she confirmed it. She first noticed the way he held his phone too tightly, how he showered at strange hours, how he smiled less, not absent, just less, as though his joy now belonged to someone else. She recalled the night everything broke. It was a Thursday. The house smelled like garlic and basil because she had made his favorite pasta dish, the one she made when she hoped to pull him close again. She wore the navy sweater he liked. She lit candles. She even turned on their old jazz playlist, the one they danced to in their kitchen when they were too broke to go out but too in love to care. He came home late. When he walked in, guilt clung to him so heavily she could almost smell it on him. He looked tired, more tired than usual, but also oddly restless, as though his thoughts were louder than his surroundings. "Dinner's ready," she said softly. "Thanks," he replied, voice thin. They sat, they ate, or rather she ate. He pushed food around his plate, barely taking a few bites. After a long silence, Ethan finally said, "Marissa, we need to talk." The room went still. The candles flickered. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. "Is there someone else?" she whispered, her voice trembling. His silence answered before his words did. "I'm so sorry," he muttered, staring down at his hands. "It just happened." Her breath left her like she had been punched. She pushed back her chair so quickly it scraped the hardwood floor. "How does cheating just happen, Ethan? Did you trip and fall into her arms? Did you accidentally end up in her car, at her place? Did it just happen?" He shut his eyes, the shame weighing his shoulders down. "I messed up," he whispered. The tears spilled from Marissa's eyes in a slow, devastating release. She paced the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter to steady herself as she sobbed. "You promised me," she said through broken breaths. "You promised you would always love me. You promised we could make it through anything. You promised." "I know, and I meant every promise." "Then how could you do this?" she cried, her voice cracking like shattered glass. He had no answer. He never would. That night he slept in the guest room, or rather, he lay awake in it. The ceiling felt too low, the walls felt too close, and her muffled crying through the door sounded sharper than any knife. The next morning, he expected her to throw him out. But she didn't. She walked downstairs, eyes swollen, voice hoarse. "Ethan," she said quietly, "I'm not ready to end our marriage." His heart jolted. "But I'm not ready to forgive you, either." He swallowed hard. "I understand." "You don't," she replied. "Not yet." There was something fierce in her voice, pain wrapped in steel. She set rules, non-negotiable, firm, and necessary. "You'll sleep in the guest room," she said. "You'll go to therapy, alone. You'll answer every question I have. And you will not, under any circumstance, contact her again." "I won't," he said immediately. "Swear it." "I swear." The words left his mouth with such raw desperation that his chest tightened, because he meant it. He meant it with every bone in him. For the first time, he realized fear, not of losing comfort, but of losing her. Over the next few weeks, their house lived in a strange quiet, not cold, but wounded. Ethan tried everything he could think of, cooking dinner, cleaning, leaving her small notes, giving her space, offering hugs she wasn't ready to accept. Sometimes she spoke to him, sometimes she couldn't look at him, sometimes she screamed into a pillow at night, thinking he couldn't hear. But he could. He heard everything, and every sound tore him apart. He deleted the other woman's number. He changed his routines. He went to therapy every Tuesday evening, telling a stranger the story of how he had destroyed the best thing in his life. He learned about emotional accountability, about the difference between desire and commitment, about rebuilding what he broke. And yet, it was Marissa who took the bigger risk. Because staying requires courage. Staying after betrayal requires a kind of bravery people rarely praise. One night, about a month after the confession, she knocked softly on the guest room door. "Can I come in?" she asked. His heart jumped. Of course. She entered slowly, arms wrapped around herself. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Anything." "Why her?" His breath faltered. "I don't know," he said honestly. "It wasn't about her. It wasn't even about you. It was about me. About feeling like I wasn't good enough in my own life, like I was failing at everything I touched. And when she showed interest, it felt like a shortcut to feeling valued again. But it was fake, cheap, nothing compared to what we have." She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "You hurt me more than I ever thought you could," she whispered. "I know. And yet, I still love you." His eyes filled instantly. "I don't deserve that," he whispered. "No," she said softly. "You don't, but love isn't about deserving, it's about choosing." She turned to leave, but before she reached the door, he said in a trembling voice, "I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you didn't make a mistake by choosing me." Her steps paused. She didn't turn around, but she nodded. A small nod. A hopeful nod. That night, he cried quietly after she left, because for the first time since everything fell apart, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long while. A chance. A small, fragile chance. And Ethan decided he would not waste it. Ethan woke up every day with a strange mixture of dread and determination. It was like walking on a bridge he had burned himself, but was now rebuilding one terrified step at a time. Every morning he passed Marissa in the hallway, offering a gentle good morning, hoping she would respond. Sometimes she did. Sometimes she didn't. But he never stopped trying. 3 months after the truth shattered their marriage, something began to shift, not loudly or dramatically, but quietly, like frost melting under the sunrise. The air between them softened. Their conversations lasted longer. They started eating dinner at the same table again. The silences weren't always painful. Sometimes they were simply quiet. And then therapy, her therapy, entered the picture. She chose a counselor across town, someone she said she could speak to freely without feeling watched by neighbors who already monitored everyone's business. On Wednesday afternoons, she left the house carrying her leather-bound journal, walking with an air of composed pain. The journal was new, something she bought the day after his confession. She wrote in it relentlessly. One evening, she was sitting at the dining table, scribbling, when he walked in with 2 mugs of tea. "I made chamomile," he said. "You like it before bed." She blinked, surprised. "Thank you." He set the mug beside her journal, but didn't sit. He never sat without permission anymore, never intruded into her space unless invited. "Did you want to sit?" she asked after a moment. His heart nearly stopped. "Only if you want me to." She nodded. He sat across from her. Her eyes fell to her journal, fingers tightening around the pen. "Did therapy go okay today?" he asked quietly. She exhaled deeply. It was exhausting. Healing is exhausting. He swallowed. "I know I'm asking more of you than anyone should ever have to give." She looked up, her expression somber. "Then why did you make me go through this at all?" He didn't flinch from the pain in her voice. He accepted it. He welcomed it, because he deserved it. "Because I was weak," he said, "and selfish, and insecure. I was drowning in my own failures instead of talking to the one person who loved me enough to help me breathe." Her jaw trembled just slightly. "You talk like you regret it," she whispered. "I regret it every second I breathe." Silence stretched between them, raw, delicate, and full of things they hadn't yet said. Finally, she closed her journal. "Ethan," she murmured, "do you still love me?" He leaned forward slowly, cautiously, like approaching something sacred. "With everything I am," he whispered. "With everything I ever was, with everything I'm trying to be." Her eyes shimmered. He didn't reach for her hands. He let her decide. And finally, after months of distance, she placed her hand over his. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. Over the next weeks, the shift grew steadier. They went grocery shopping together again. They laughed, not as freely as before, but genuinely. They even took a Sunday walk through the neighborhood park, bundled in coats, their breaths visible in the crisp air. Ethan didn't try to hold her hand. But halfway through the walk, she slipped her fingers through his. He felt the world stop. He felt hope return like color returning to a black and white frame. After that day, the healing became more intentional. Marissa invited him back to the dinner table more often. She asked questions, not accusations, but questions that helped her understand the broken pieces she was trying to glue back together. "What did you feel after? What did you think when you looked at yourself in the mirror? What did you tell yourself to justify it? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Ethan answered each one honestly, brutally honestly. He learned that transparency isn't comfortable, it's cleansing. One night, after answering a particularly painful question, he broke down, covering his face with his hands. "I hate who I was," he said through tears. "I hate that I hurt you. If leaving is what you need to heal, I'll leave. If staying away from you means you'll be okay again, I'll go. I'll do anything to give you peace." Marissa stared at him, breath unsteady. "And if what I need isn't for you to leave," she whispered, "but for you to learn how to stay." His head jerked up. "I can stay," he said immediately, chest heaving. I'll stay in every way you need me to. I'll stay even when it's uncomfortable. I'll stay even when it's hard. I'll stay even when you can't look at me. I'm here, I'm not going anywhere." Tears finally spilled down her cheeks, but they weren't the hopeless ones from the night of his confession. They were the tears of someone slowly choosing to fight. For her healing. And for their marriage. The real turning point happened on a rain-soaked Saturday evening. Thunder rolled outside the house, lightning flashing through the windows every few minutes. Ethan sat in the living room reading the emotional recovery book his therapist had recommended, doing the work quietly, privately, intentionally. Marissa walked in, lingering at the entrance with a softness he hadn't seen in ages. "Ethan," she said. He looked up immediately. "Yes." "I want to talk." He set the book aside gently. "Of course." She walked over and sat beside him, close, but not touching. She wrung her hands in her lap and took a shaky breath. "I've been writing a lot," she began, "in my journal, and I realized something important today." He held very still. "What is it?" he asked softly. She looked at him, not with anger, not with fear, but with truth. I don't want to live in resentment anymore, she whispered. I don't want the rest of our marriage to be defined by your mistake. His lungs emptied in a trembling exhale. I understand, he whispered, and I want that too, more than anything. She nodded slowly, tears forming. I can't pretend it didn't happen, she said. I can't forget it, but I'm tired of hurting. I'm tired of feeling like your betrayal is the only chapter that matters. Her voice trembled. I want to rebuild us, fully, not halfway, not cautiously. I want to try again. Ethan's eyes closed in relief, such overwhelming relief that he felt dizzy. Marissa, he breathed, I'll give you every brick you need to rebuild us, every truth, every effort, every ounce of humility I have. I'll follow your lead. I'll do whatever you ask. She wiped her eyes and whispered, then kneel. His heart jolted. Not from shame. From understanding. She needed to see him surrender, not as a punishment, but as a promise. Ethan stood slowly, then lowered himself to his knees in front of her. Not groveling, not desperate, just open, honest, submissive in the way a man becomes when he chooses accountability instead of ego. He bowed his head. I'm yours, he whispered, not because I deserve you, but because I'm willing to earn you again. Marissa placed her hand on his cheek, lifting his face gently. Look at me. He raised his eyes, tears pooling at the edges. I forgive you, she whispered. A sob tore out of him, raw, unrestrained, unashamed. Her thumb brushed his cheek. But forgiveness, she continued, is a beginning, not an ending. He nodded vigorously, emotion choking his voice. I know. I'm choosing us, she said softly, but you will choose us every single day. No more shortcuts, no more weak escapes. You stay, you fight. You tell me the truth even when it's uncomfortable. You love me the way you promised to. That is your vow now. He placed his hands gently over hers. I accept, he whispered, completely. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his, a gesture they once shared in their happiest years, a gesture that spoke of safety and home. And for the first time in months, they felt whole again. That night, she let him lay beside her in their bed, not touching, but close enough that their breaths mingled in the darkness. It was the first time he had been allowed back into their room since the betrayal. He stared at the ceiling, overwhelmed. Marissa, he whispered. Thank you. She reached for his hand in the dark. Don't thank me, she murmured. Just love me better. I will. I know, she whispered. That's why I let you stay. The weeks that followed were filled with rebuilding, not magically or instantly, but through small moments of consistent effort. They cooked dinner together. They went to therapy together. They revisited old date traditions. They talked, truly talked, for hours. And Marissa grew into forgiveness the way spring grows into a cold landscape, slowly at first, then all at once. By the time fall arrived, their marriage wasn't just repaired. It was reborn. Stronger, truer, softer, deeper. One evening, as they sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Marissa leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. Ethan, she said quietly. Yeah. I'm glad I chose to fight for us. He kissed the top of her head. I'm glad you did too. She smiled. You know, if someone had told me a year ago that I'd forgive something like this, I would have never believed them. He nodded. Forgiveness doesn't make you weak, it makes you brave. She took his hand. And submitting to the work, she added, makes you a better man. He squeezed her fingers gently. It makes me your man, he whispered. She leaned closer, her voice barely above a breath. You always were.